Ever since I was little, I remember watching TV shows like Unwrapped or the behind the scenes making of The Lord of the Rings. And since then, I've developed a very deep love for behind the scenes content, which is why when this company invited me out to see how models were made, I jumped at the chance. Hopefully, I don't get banned this time. I'm in Waco, Texas. Home of Fixer Upper and, more importantly, Dr. Pepper, visiting a small company known as Black Site Studios. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned how we were going to look at model casting, but the truth is, in this giant 20,000 square foot warehouse, they do a lot more than just casting models. For instance, here in the game lab, they play test and develop their games, they publish games, they also laser cut their own MDF terrain, and we're gonna look at all that today. Now, the vast majority of models made here at Black Site Studios start right in this room with Ben, the creative director and also one of the founders of Black Site Studios. He also is responsible for all of the engineering of the sculpts, which involves cutting the models, preparing them for molds. Now, once a model's done being sculpted in ZBrush and it's been cut apart and it's ready for mold making, we first have to print a master, which also happens in-house right in this room. They're also playing around with the idea of using 3D printing as a method of manufacturing. So not using resin or plastic, but printing the model and shipping that to the consumer. Now, once a master has been 3D printed and cured and is ready for mold making, it comes over here. And Black Site Studios has two kinds of molds they make. A more traditional two-part silicone dump mold that you may have seen on the internet and many YouTube videos. But the more interesting one is a vulcanized rubber mold that's used for spin casting. So this is the inside of a spin cast vulcanized rubber mold, and you can see a ton of them that are currently in production here as well. You see all the models arranged in a circle and also metal locator pins so nothing gets misaligned. This is a vulcanizer. This thing essentially bakes the rubber so that it's hard and cured and can be reused multiple times. Before the models get cast in their vulcanized rubber molds, they have to be heated up in this heat box. What that does is allows the resin to fully fill the mold, keep it nice and warm so it flows nicely. Before the model goes in that baking box, however, it gets sprayed with some mold release right here so the model comes out nicely and doesn't get stuck. Now, when a mold is fully baked and ready to go for casting, it comes into this area. They first pump out some resin, mix it up, and then pour it in the mold, and then it comes over here to the spin caster, which is where it gets its name. In this device, it forces the resin toward the outside of the mold with centrifugal force, which limits bubbles and voids in the casts. Now, the resin used for spin casting in the world of resins kicks off and cures really fast. But when it comes out of the mold, it's still really flexible. And that's very important so that they're able to demold without breaking any parts because they're too brittle. So one of the limitations of a spin cast mold is how deep the mold can be. So larger objects like vehicles or terrain are done with more typical molding and casting methods called dump molds. You take two parts of a mold, you pour it into a cup, you put your model in there. It's one piece or two piece, or maybe even more, but then it goes into one of these pressure pots, and in here, the resin cures. And what this pressure pot does is it reduces the size of bubbles to microscopic, invisible levels so that you can't even see them when they come out. And before even that process, the mold silicone gets degassed. So there are no bubbles in the mold, there's no bubbles in the resin, you get a nice, clean cast. This place is a hot box, bro. Once the model's done being cast and the resin is all fully cured, it comes over here on these large trays, and it looks like this. And it needs to be clipped still for production. And it looks like right now we have some Hametsu models on this particular sprue. Now, once a model is fully cured and ready to go, it comes over here to Brittany, who's responsible for clipping the pieces off of the mold, but also checking the pieces for any kind of defects, mold slips, large voids. She then puts them in small little baggies that then go into the final packaging that you get when you buy a Black Site Studios product. She also puts other things in the box like cards any extra goodies that needs to be inside of the packaging. Now, the last stage of a model's life here at Blacksite Studios is right here. This is the fulfillment area in the warehouse, and Tracy is responsible for making sure you get all the stuff that you ordered. She also takes care of back orders and also pre-orders. So if a web order is missing a certain part, she makes sure that there's progress being made. Now, yet another thing that Blacksite Studios does here in-house is their own product photography, and have this little area set up in the corner so that you can browse their websites and see nice clean photos of all the stuff they have painted. I'm saving this for later. Let's take a brief break from our tour to thank the sponsor for this portion of today's video, which is, unsurprisingly, Blacksite Studios. Founded in 2017, selling pre-painted terrain, by 2020, Blacksite had launched their first hit game, Don't Look Back. Nowadays, they're launching a new game called Mobile Arms Endless Destiny. Calling all mech fans! Mobile Arms is a fast-paced 32mm skirmish game for 2 or more players. This game is set in a future where humanity has settled the far stars. You play as a handler overseeing a small mercenary company of frame tech, which are mechanized machines of battle that you'll pit against an opponent. Each player takes control of 2 to 4 frames. Mobile Arms games are meant to be played quickly, using 3 custom measuring widgets for movement and a card-based system to build your frames. Gameplay is fast and fluid. The mechs have attachment points not only in-game, but on the models too. This quick change system means you can assemble and field frames in a snap, or just play with whatever looks cool to you. This game was launched on something called The Backroom, which is like a hybrid between a pre-order and a crowdfunding campaign. Blacksite started their Backroom program in 2020 to help produce brand new indie games with a focus on beginner developers. They pride themselves on their Backroom projects being built on a platform of contained and controlled growth. Unlike many crowdfunded projects out there, Backrooms are designed with a set scope of a project that they've gone through before, which is key. Each project takes approximately 7 months to fulfill once pre-orders open. They're confident in being able to manufacture as many components as possible in-house and deliver them to customers in a timely manner. Don't take my word for it though. Hop on their community Discord and ask any of the fans that have invested in any one of their 5 successfully produced and delivered games to date. There are no minimum sales needed for this product to come into existence. Whether 10 or 10,000, they commit to making and delivering every Backroom project as quickly as possible. You can find a link to Mobile Arms Backroom project in the description below. Shout out to Blacksite Studios for not only letting me tour their facilities, but also sponsoring this portion of today's video. All right, back to the tour. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned laser cut terrain, which we'll talk about now. That was actually one of the biggest areas that Blacksite Studios got their foothold in. Both Connor and also Ben started out in the O-scale terrain world, and now Blacksite Studios makes a ton of fantasy, modern, and also sci-fi laser cut terrain. Have you ever been curious what an entire railway car of 8x4 MDF sheet looks like? Wonder no more, because this is what it looks like. Blacksite Studios orders a lot of their product in bulk to be cut and laser cut. And the first thing that happens is it comes over to this large panel cutting saw to be cut down into size. Now, a reasonable question is, why bother cutting down the sheets? Why not just cut a ton of kits on one 8x4 sheet? Well, that's because a lot of the Blacksite Terrain Studios kits come pre-painted. So they want to cut them down for the relevant kit and also paint it up, which is where we are now. So sheets of MDF will come in on a rack like this and get painted in this gigantic industrial spray booth, which has ventilation that goes up and out through the ceiling of the warehouse. Once sheets get painted, they go on here to dry, and then it's onto the laser cutting. Blacksite Studios has access to 8 gigantic laser cutters, and they're all manned by one person, Travis. He has his full stock here of painted MDF. He'll come, grab a sheet, put it on one of these machines, and get it nice and cutting. Now, the designs are made in Adobe Illustrator by either Doug Kundo or one of the other people in the company. And the best part is that all of the machines are named after Pacific Rim mechs. Love it. So right now we're kneeling in front of Gypsy Danger, one of the original laser cutters that Blacksite Studio bought. And laser cutting MDF terrain is a beautiful science. There are 3 material inputs to this machine. One is obviously power that controls the laser, which is the main cutting force. 2, there is a coolant that makes sure that the laser and all of these components stay nice and cold. And 3, there is a compressor built into all these machines so that the soot and the smoke and the ash gets blown away from the cutting while it's happening. Otherwise, you get tons of smoke, and that affects the laser and how accurate it is. The laser bounces through a series of mirrors until it is pointed straight down at the cutting bed. And the laser, much like a camera lens, has to be focused on the exact level that the MDF terrain is on. If it's out of focus, then there are problems that occur. If you get a piece of MDF that's slightly warped or bent at all, it's too close or too far away, you get cutting issues. I'm standing in front of the laser graveyard. One thing I was surprised to hear is that some of the components in a laser cutter are consumable and need to be replaced a lot, and other parts need to be maintenanced quite a bit, which is why they have a full-time employee in Travis on staff taking care of all 8. Now, these glass tubes have the laser element running down the very center of them, and the rest of the cavity is filled up with that coolant to keep them nice and cold. Giggity. Now, one of the very last jobs that Travis does with these MDF kits is he shrink wraps them. And that's how it arrives at your door when you order it off the website or buy it at your local friendly game store. In addition to all of the tasks and responsibilities that employees here at Blacksite have, they also design their own games. You have Hametsu, designed by Doug, a fantasy game set in feudal Japan. Connor, one of the other founders of Blacksite that we haven't mentioned yet, was responsible for designing the game Lunar, which is coming out pretty soon. But they also publish games by other people, like Demonship by Millet, that you saw me play live on Twitch with 52 Miniatures. Also, Yasfiga by Corey Sullivan that I've featured on the channel previously. And lastly, the seminal Don't Look Back, designed by Matthew Burns. This is one of the first games they've made and has become quite popular since. Well, this is a super fun video to make. I hope you guys also enjoyed it as well and learned as much as I did about the process. Huge shout out to Blacksite Studios for inviting me. I was super impressed with the operation they have going here. They're not only a manufacturer, but they're also a designer, a publisher of games. They also do live streaming. They're also running an e-commerce business. They're also distributing their product to local stores. They do everything under the roof here, and it's really impressive and also inspiring for me. So huge shout out to Connor, Ben, Travis, the laser operator, James, the resin spincaster, Doug, the production manager, Tracy, the production assistant and fulfillment person, and Brittany, the QA and also backup laser operator. You guys are all awesome and were super nice to me, allowing me to walk through your spaces and mess with your stuff and ask a bunch of questions. Now, if you want to work at BSS and have constipation, fear not, all the employees here are scared shitless whenever they go to the bathroom. That's gonna do it for this one, guys. Subscribe or die, but most importantly, don't forget to